Hello and welcome to Prairie Pulse. Coming up a little bit later in the show, we'll hear music from Jeff James. But first, joining me now is Dr. Ann Blankenship, a North Dakota State University religious studies professor. Dr. Blankenship, thanks much for joining us today. As we start off, tell us a little about yourself and your background.
Sure. Well, thank you for inviting me here. And I grew up in Washington State, and from there I went to college there, and then I went to Yale Divinity School for my master's, headed south down to North Carolina for graduate school, and then had a postdoc in St. Louis at the Danforth Center on Religion and Politics. And then after a year back in Washington, ended up here. So I'm doing a circuit.
Okay. So what classes do you teach at NDSU?
I teach just about everything related to religion. So survey courses on world religion, specific seminars on global Islam and the history of Christianity, a course on religion and politics. And this semester, I actually just taught a straight up history course on World War II. We went to London, Normandy, and Paris.
Well, we may get it. But today, here we are in the month of April, and Easter is upon us, and we're here to talk a little bit about that. So let's talk about the origins of Easter. Can you sort of explain to us Easter's significance and, when it started and the history of that?
Yeah, of course. So Easter commemorates and celebrates the resurrection of Jesus Christ, of course, and the holidays related to Easter, all, the week before, and then even in many weeks leading up to Easter during the season of Lent. And so Christians started celebrating Easter really quite soon after the death of Christ. And they commemorated it through various observations, but since Christianity started in a place where it's the minority religion and a pagan tradition, as Easter evolved kind of through time, we got the adoption of more like pagan traditions. That's why we have bunnies and bunnies that lay eggs, of all things, right? That go with this, because it is a springtime holiday, and there were already pagan holidays that celebrated fertility and kind of the resurrection of the earth. So it ended up being kind of a fitting match to celebrate spring along with the resurrection of Christ.
Okay. So why does Easter seem to fall on a different calendar date from year to year?
Of course. So Easter moves because Passover moves. So Passover is a Jewish holiday that commemorates the Exodus. That's when Israelites fled from Pharaoh in Egypt and eventually made their way into the Promised Land. And Jesus, of course, growing up in Palestine, was a Jew, right, of kind of working class family. And he went into Jerusalem on now what we celebrate as Palm Sunday. That's the day where we celebrate him entering Jerusalem for this pilgrimage holiday that was Passover. And so as a Jew, he was celebrating Passover, and the Passover meal is usually kind of linked to the Last Supper. The Gospels disagree exactly what day it was that Jesus was crucified. But in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the Last Supper is that Passover meal. And so since the Jewish calendar moves, Easter moves along with it.
Well, and you talked a little bit, and what happened to the various disciples following Christ's crucifixion based on the Bible or whatever understand some of them suffered violent deaths.
They did suffer some unfortunate ends. There's a statue in, it's the Duomo in Milan, where St. Bartholomew, who's one of Jesus' disciples, I think he encountered probably the worst death. He was actually skinned alive and then crucified. And there's this just amazing statue that shows Bartholomew standing near the altar with his skin draped around his shoulders, which is a very dramatic image, but it does remind us of the persecution that those disciples faced. Of all of them, only John escaped and lived, a full life, dying of old age. So they all dispersed after Jesus' death around the Mediterranean and just shared this story about Jesus' life, Jesus' messages.
Yeah, can you talk about, I guess, to a lay person maybe, what proof the disciples had that Christ had been resurrected?
I wish they had written down some notes. That would have been very helpful for us to think about that. We do have the story in the Gospel of John of St. Thomas. Of course, doubting Thomas, right? Mm-hmm. We call people doubting Thomases when they are asking for proof of whatever event. And the story of Thomas in the Gospel of John has, the other disciples have met with Jesus in person, and Thomas hears about this, he wasn't there, and goes, I don't believe it. Until I can, stick my finger in the wounds on his side and the holes in his hands, I'm not going to believe it. And of course, Jesus appears to Thomas, and there's this Caravaggio painting where Jesus is kind of looking down, and he has this gash from the sword in his side, and Thomas is sticking his finger right up in there. It's just so graphic, but it gives you this feeling for what it might have been like, certainly.
You talk about Passover and such. Do the people of the Jewish faith actually celebrate Easter?
No, they do not, because Jesus is considered the Son of God, but just for Christians. Mm-hmm. They know Jesus existed. They acknowledge that he had, good moral teachings, mm-hmm. But they don't celebrate him as the Son of God.
So church-going a little bit, church membership, is it increasing or declining in the United States?
It's been declining for the past few centuries or so. For the past few decades. And just recently, several years ago, they had a poll that showed that the majority, I think it's about 56% now of people in the U.S., not just Christians, so Muslims, Jews, everybody. So of all Americans, about 56% seldom or never attend church services. And so church membership has, not surprisingly, also gone down during that same period.
Yeah. So why do you think that's the case?
It's kind of the $1 million for churches that would like to find out and get their people back. I think the younger generation has been maybe displeased by some of the conservative political activism, as things like gay marriage have gained greater acceptance. Some have looked back on conservative traditions and been dissatisfied with that. Maybe in the Catholic Church, how that women are not allowed to be ordained, things like this. But your guess is possibly as good as mine, because I think there are a lot of factors.
Yeah. So in-person church going, has it increased since COVID? Of course, is potentially sort of winding down now.
Well, it went up until about September 21, and then it plateaued. So still, it's only about 2/3 of people are attending who did attend services. 2/3 of that population is back attending like they used to, and then of the remaining third, some are watching online. It's hard to quite suss out those numbers, since some are attending in person occasionally. Sometimes, they decide they're going to stay in bed and watch from home. So it's hard to know what percentage is still engaged in some sort of worship on Sunday or Friday, or whatever your day of prayer is. But it has not recovered.
Okay. Let's talk about some of your research projects that you do, including, I guess, religious responses to injustice. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. That's one of my main research interests. And As a graduate student, you see a topic and realize not much has been written on it, and that's always exciting to find a gap, right? That's what we're after as historians, to kind of fill some of these gaps and challenge ideas that have been set by previous historians. And I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, and so the incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II was always part of our, relatively recent history. Our parents had friends who had been children in the incarceration camps, and so I'd always been interested in this topic. And I found out when I was in graduate school that there was virtually nothing written about religion in the camps. And when I was growing up, I saw religion seems to be the cause of all these wars, the Crusades, all these bad things. And then I realized that religion was the cause of fights, all the flip side of it as well, right? You have in the U.S. Christians supporting slavery, and you have Christians supporting abolitionism. And so rather than getting sunk in the depressing mire of negative work, I wanted to focus on those fights for justice. So in my graduate work, then I looked at the Christians who were supporting the Japanese Americans, families, children, even infants that were with white foster families were taken from those households and cast into these camps in the desert or Arkansas Delta, all over the country.
Yeah, can you give us more maybe examples of relationships between national, religious, and of course racial identities, that research that you're doing there?
Yeah, sure. So within that same project, I examined how Japanese Americans that were in those camps were celebrating kind of national and religious holidays. And so I found in this camp in southern Idaho, my grandparents farmed in southern Idaho right around this camp, so I had a particular interest in it. And at this camp, they had these huge Christmas celebrations, but of course most people in the camps were Buddhist. And I went through, all this documentation and discovered, partially through reading the camp newspapers, but also the official government reports and everything, that it was a group of Buddhists that started these huge Christmas celebrations every year in the camps. And that just got me too curious about that relationship between their religious identity, their national identity, and they made it very clear that they were celebrating Christmas, not Easter so much actually, but they were celebrating Christmas because they were Americans and they saw Christmas as an American holiday. And certainly the commercialization and kind of frippery around Christmas does allow you to celebrate it while, not really acknowledging its religious origins. And so this became a place where they could demonstrate their Americanness, but also they used their Christmas celebrations to, it's really amazing, just subtly point out the injustice of the incarceration itself. So they would make Christmas cards, this beautiful artwork on Christmas cards that would show that, typical Christmas scene of a snow-covered house with, chimney and, just this idyllic winter scene. But it would be of their barracks and the muddy tracks between them. And just, they were being realistic. They were saying, we're doing this American holiday, but you limit how we're,
So you actually wrote a book
I did.
About the Japanese internment camps during World War II. So is that book still available and out there?
Oh, absolutely. It's called Christianity, Social Justice, and the Japanese American Incarceration During World War II.
Okay.
Not a short title, but yes. And so in that book, I look at these two facets that I just mentioned. So on one hand, looking at the Christians and other folks who were in the camps that were incarcerated during the war, and of the white Christians on the outside. A lot of them Quakers, but representatives from most major Protestant denominations, and then there were Catholics also. And so some of their white pastors who worked with them on the West Coast actually voluntarily went to the camps with them. And faced a lot of discrimination, in those locations, trying to find housing in the outside community.
Yeah, you talk about the Buddhism, so they were celebrating Americans, not necessarily Christ.
Yes.
Okay, I mean, say
exactly.
that. So through the years, what are some of the more probing or interesting religious questions you've gotten from your students over the years?
I think students tend to have the most questions about wanting to clarify and connect, things they've maybe heard on the news, things they've seen in popular culture with the subjects we're studying, right? So I start all my classes with a current event report so they can understand the relevance of whatever it is we're studying with what's happening in the world right now. So in my world religions class, we kind of do about a religion every week or so, and students then have to present on, what is happening, what are the most important stories worldwide about Islam or Christianity or Buddhism or whatever religion it is that week. And it's, in this class, it always varies, right? Because I never know what they're going to come up with. But it does really shift the tone of classes to, certainly make it relevant, but you never know what's going to come up. And, I think I hope that it gets them excited about realizing that they do need this background knowledge to really understand what's happening in the world.
Let's go back to Easter for just a moment. How does the Ukrainian Orthodox Easter differ from, traditional Easter masses and such?
Sure. So when we talk about Easter in the U.S., most people are talking about the Roman Catholic traditions, right? Or traditions that were set by the Roman Catholic Church and then followed by Protestants as well. And so the Eastern Orthodox Church split from the Roman Catholic Church in the early centuries of Christianity. And that was actually the date of Easter was one of the first things they argued about. And that's why Ukrainian Orthodox don't celebrate Easter on the same day that most Americans do. So they follow a different calendar. I think probably the most obvious physical difference that people notice are those just gorgeous, ornately painted eggs, right? They definitely don't match the dunk-dyed vinegar-smelling eggs that we make otherwise. But I know a couple churches in the area have sponsored fundraisers where you take a class and paint eggs in this way to support the folks of Ukraine. And one of the other differences, they follow the same Holy Week celebrations that kind of imitate what was happening in the last week of Christ's life. But instead of celebrating Palm Sunday, they most frequently celebrate what they call Willow Sunday. It was just kind of an acknowledgement of there aren't all that many palm trees in the Ukraine. Okay. And so they used willow branches instead. So there are little variations like that, but for the most part, they're celebrating the exact same thing. So.
Okay. So, do you find that students are interested in religious study classes or are interested in Easter and how they engage when you're teaching them?
Yeah, I do. In part, as I just mentioned, about, they want to tie this into current events and understand what's going on in the world around them. But also, I try to emphasize the importance of religious literacy in general. So not just in terms of current events, but getting to know your neighbor and understanding what your coworker is celebrating, these sorts of holidays.
Well, I'm sorry, we are out of time. So if people want more information, where can they go?
One of my favorite Easter documentaries is the Rick Steves Easter program, which is available on PBS, not a plug in that direction, but I love all the Easter Rick Steves travel shows. I think that's a good resource. If you want to know more about religious studies in general, there's a podcast called Keeping It 101 that I would recommend.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Stay tuned for more. Jeff James is an eternal showman who loves every aspect of entertaining. His favorite styles of music include folk, blues, country, and gospel.
My name is Jeff James. I'm from a small town called New London in Minnesota, and we are now currently with my family in the Twin Cities area. Currently, I'm doing a live looping show that incorporates rock, blues, country, folk, and some Christian music as well. I've been a full-time musician since I was 19, got my start in St. Cloud, and was with a band at that point who started touring for about 3 years or so. And at the end of the night, most people would kind of just sit at the bar and party, and I would go home or go back to my hotel room, and I had brought my portable recording studio, so I'd sit there until the sun came up, just playing guitar, just because I was very passionate about it. At the end of about 3 years, I was kind of tired of being away. I was away from my wife, girlfriend back then, and then just was looking to further my career in music, so we decided to move to Nashville, and Nashville is kind of where everything kind of skyrocketed forward, where I was able to do 6 albums there, get connected, play downtown. I found a great club downtown, part of their house band there, and that was just an amazing experience, and I think that just pushed me to a new level. And after 7 years, we ended up moving back to Minneapolis, where I've been doing solo shows ever since.
Play something good, play something loud.
So Play Something Good is kind of autobiographical, based on events that may or may not have happened at some point. But as a cover artist, I do a lot of covers where I play. You try to please everybody, but you can't always please everybody. And I remember this one instance where this kind of big guy came up to me, and I was a little concerned about it. And then he said, "Play something good," but he said it a little bit more gruffly, like, "All right, play something good." And so the song kind of came out of that experience, and then maybe a couple of experiences along the way too, just trying to get everybody involved in the music that you play.
Well, I stepped onto a stage in Minnesota, and every eye was turned to a man I didn't know. Well, he looked grumpy, he looked mad. It took everything I had not to pack right up and just to walk back out the door. At the moment he came up to criticize me, I had a feeling there was nothing I could do. For to soothe this savage beast took more than music, and in less than kind demeanor he said it too. Play something good, play something loud. Mister, you won't make us happy, oh man, you won't win this crowd if you don't play something we all can sing, dance to, cry to, anything. Mister, you won't make us happy unless you play something good. At the second table to the left I saw her, hiding out behind a glass of Chardonnay. The sadness in her eyes sent me a message, and the empty chair beside her gave it away. Play something good, play something loud. Mister, you won't make us happy, oh man, you won't win this crowd if you don't play something we all can sing, dance to, cry to, anything. Mister, you won't make us happy unless you play something good. Ow. Well, I played them every song you could imagine, from the king of rock and roll to a man named Hank, when even Jimmy Buffett wasn't working. Every last ambition in me sang. When all at once the thought occurred, say they'd had enough. I sang a song about a boy named Jackie and a dragon they called Puff. The twinkle came to those angry eyes, and her tears were kept at bay. But from the corner, a rowdy crowd, I thought I heard them say, play something good, play something loud. Mister, you won't make us happy, oh man, you won't win this crowd if you don't play something we all can sing, dance to, cry to, anything. Mister, you won't make us happy unless you play something good. Mister, you won't make us happy unless you play something good.
Well, that's all we have on Prairie Pulse this week, and as always, thanks for watching.
Funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4, 2008. And by the members of Prairie Public.